Welcome to Lady Audaci-TEA. I'm Alex.
And I'm Meredith. And quick note, Alex is joining us from another state, another time, another place. And listen, Grandpa's got the kids outside, but there might be some noise. It's just going to be the joy of children on vacation. So be cool about that. Also be cool about the fact that Alex has dyslexia. Sometimes it means we pronounce words differently. But we
Yes.
actually had a breakthrough. We were voice memoing as we are wont to do. And Alex had a Camilla breakthrough. And I stood up and cheered in my car, which was very awkward, like my child had just performed Wind Beneath My Wings at the talent show. I was so proud, and that was real big. That was big, Alex.
So let's see it. Oh gosh, I'm
Oh no,
getting
I
stage
didn't mean
fright.
I didn't mean to put you on the
Let's
spot.
test it out.
Okay.
Camilla.
Yes!
You guys see how I say it so quietly and soft? That's how you know I'm there, but I'm still a little nervous.
Oh my god, but
Camilla.
it was so good.
When I
Oh,
say her name calmly, that's the only reason
my
why.
baby's growing up so fast. I am older than Alex. I'm not old enough to be her mother, but I could be her cool
No.
older sister, right?
She's
I
the
think that could
best
work.
sister. She's my best bestie.
Oh my god,
I
bestie.
do like randomly text you at all hours of the night. So
No, I love it. That I text Alex more than my husband. So we are doing this from vacation. At least
oh.
one of us is. And this episode, we're going to get into some quick housekeeping, but this is a biggie. This episode is a biggie. So a little housekeeping
Yes.
first on premium content. We just did our Princess Anne deep dive. Alex took me through, and damn, she can be a bad bitch. She can just be bad and a bitch, but she can be a bad bitch
Bad
and a bitch. So that
combo
is
sometimes. Yep.
premium content that is over on Apple subscriptions or Patreon. So if you want ad-free early drops, all that good stuff, go over to Patreon or Apple and subscribe Lady Audacity. We currently have on our Patreon a poll for next month. Unfortunately, we can't do all that fun stuff on Apple subscriptions, but we do have a poll voting on our August deep dive Eras Tour Women of the Crown style. And right now it is neck and neck between Camilla Parker Bowles and Wallace Simpson. Those are good
Oh, those are
ones.
both
Those
so
are real good. I
exciting.
am excited
Yeah, those
for
are
whichever
really.
one is selected. So definitely go check that out. Our $25 supporter, HRH Duchess Nora. We are
Hey,
we
Duchess.
we kiss the ring or whatever. I think that's the Pope, but whatever. You know what I mean.
Whatever it is, says you're supreme.
Whatever. So this episode today is really dedicated to Scabbers, aka Dan Wootton, because if you see Scabbers from Harry Potter, you cannot unsee it. It is Dan. It's Dirty Dan. And so most of our
Oh
episode will
gosh.
focus on him. But we are going to first start with some bananas articles because that's what we do. And I cannot say bananas without hearing that Gwen Stefani song. So
It is
bananas.
bananas. Bananas. How do I spell
Yes.
bananas?
Okay. I think I think that's all we can say without getting sued for like copyright infringement.
That's true.
Yeah.
And
So
we're
Alex,
already in also warning everyone now there's gonna be a lot of alleged, just to cover our
allegedly,
butts in this
allegedly,
script.
allegedly, allegedly. Please, dear
And
God,
with quotation marks on our side, but allegedly.
everywhere. Do not sue us. Dan's law firm. So
Please.
anyway, before we get going into Dan, let's do our bananas articles of the week. Alex, my love, my queen, take it away.
Da-da. Okay, so we are going to actually be jumping to a very early article that was released by Richard Eden for the Daily Mail for his section Eden Confidential on
Love that
July
guy.
5th.
Just
Right, we
kidding.
love him. Love him, the sarcasm. This was released on July 5th, 2023. It reads, former Labor MP Tristram Hunt sparks row as he pulls trans book and poster from the Young V&A before Kate reopened museum after $13 million redevelopment. Mind you, let's keep some dates in mind here. Kate visited that museum on June 28th. And then on June 29th is when William released the teaser for the conversation he would be having with the LGBTQ plus community, which showed a trans flag that got them a lot of crap in their comment section. So, and I also should point out to remember, this is the Labor MP, so I think, which is supposed to be the more liberal political group, but Tories and Labor, those are the main two. It's like in the US we have Republican Democrats, and they are transphobic. So just saying that to really see what trans people are dealing with in the UK when both major parties are speaking against you.
UK, y'all are banning books too? Do you have Moms of Liberty over there
Right?
in your school board meetings? What the hell? Like,
So,
dang.
exactly. And I want to hear your thoughts on this, Meredith, and you guys obviously send us your thoughts too, because hey, for all I know, Kate knew nothing about this and just showed up. Maybe she did know. I don't know. I just find it interesting that once again, Kate and the LGBTQ plus community, especially with the trans community, is just something that never crosses paths.
Here
Never.
here's what I'll
As far as
say.
I can remember.
Yeah. Here's what I'll
Mhm.
say with Kate. I don't know if she knew or didn't know about this, but I am not surprised that after this knowledge, this information comes out, she doesn't make a peep. Which again, do you support the human rights and of gay people, which shouldn't be a political issue? Or
Yes.
are you too upset to upset your base and appear political? And that seems to be a
Yes.
calculation she makes a lot, which again is this like, what do you stand for? Because it
Exactly.
feels
And
like nothing. And also, it's just such a blatant dog whistle to a certain community
mm,
that, oh, yeah, because you know what? It's really the books that are turning kids gay, despite the fact that we have
right?
had centuries of books about heterosexual couples, and yet that hasn't turned gay people straight. So, what's the deal?
Exactly. And it's something I think, we have mentioned before. At some point, we have to ask, even if she is not explicitly saying these things, the fact that she continues to attract this kind of attention or attract the type of people who think they need to remove these things in her presence, I have to say, well, honey, you're putting something out there eventually that is attracting these people and telling them that you can't be associated with this. So I'm going to read a little bit of the article. It says, I hear that Hunt, who's now director at the Victoria and Albert Museum, has sparked a furious row after he ordered the removal of a poster with pro-transgender messages as well as two LGBTQ plus themed books. The poster was on display at the former Museum of Childhood in the East End of London. The books were for sale in its shop. He instructed them to be removed before the Princess of Wales opened the museum under its new name, Young V&A, last week after a 3-year, $13 million development. The poster was produced by controversial charity Stonewall and read, Some people are trans, get over it.
Yes.
So,
Sorry.
yeah, right? And exactly, yes. So, and now I always think about how people say these visits are planned to a T. And that's where I do think there is a question, did they know? We always hear every photo op is like planned, you know what I mean? Everything that they walk into, like there's rarely surprises at these engagements. So again, I just wonder.
That's what I'm wondering. If there was talk of, well, we don't want to have articles that say Kate stands by LGBTQ books or Kate opens,
Exactly.
but how does Kate feel about this pushing trans, issues on us? I could see a
Mm-hmm.
let's remove it so that this doesn't impact the visit in any way. Like removing
It's
anything to just kind of
exactly.
strip away anything interesting about these visits. Because you're right, they are so
Exactly. And I
choreographed
don't the
and planned.
debate. Yeah, like I don't want to have the debate. Do I want the debate on the morning shows to be, oh,
Yeah.
Kate stands next to this book. What does it mean?
Or God forbid she gets a picture of, like, the flag in the background that's like, "We're trans,
Exactly.
get over it." Yeah, no, that's not good for
Yes.
optics.
So this like really, salt on the wound. I'm going to keep reading from the article directly now. Their removal proved particularly controversial because the museum reopened on the same day London celebrated its LGBTQ plus Pride Festival. Yeah, guys.
Oh my god, my
Continue to read from the
I'm
article.
just burying my face.
Yes, it's so bad.
Oh.
Rowan Ellis, 31, author of one of the books, Here in Queer, A Queer Girl's Guide to Life, accuses the museum of stigmatizing trans content as inappropriate for children. She describes herself as lividly angry that her work was removed, as she should. And then the Public and Commercial Services, PCS trade union, accuses the museum of seeking to hide the existence of trans people. Its culture group secretary, Steve Warwick, claims the decision adds to the current climate of transphobia and trans erasure, putting trans people, particularly young trans people, at risk. He adds, it's particularly galling that this decision was made during the LGBTQ plus history month. And then the VA spokesperson just says it was a complex decision, but the
Oh,
museum
sure.
senior team, right, felt more consultation was necessary with young people and teachers on how to present these topics to ensure their perspectives were more fulsomely represented. And this is my thing. What I find so funny is they're trying to be like, oh, we just randomly decided to pull this the morning that Kate came because we're not sure how to teach it to the children. So again, I just can't help but wonder if someone in Kate's team is at least like, don't put her name in this when you respond. Like, don't you dare. This was something else
It's the idea
entirely.
too of having to present trans issues in a wholesome way, as if the existence of people born in the wrong bodies is not wholesome, and that we have to protect other
Exactly.
people when the people that need protecting are these trans kids that need the support and love. It's disgusting, but not
Yes.
surprising.
Exactly, because nothing about these books are gonna be sexual, and that is, like, the root of this, is, like, they're sexualizing our children, they're grooming our children, and it's like, none of these books are talking about sex. They are talking about a child and their gender.
As if some of these books, like Cinderella princess stories are not, like, grooming children to live and die
Right?
by finding a man and,
Well, it's, like,
being
more about their
whisked away.
sexuality in those books, yeah, than a
Right?
trans
I'm
book because
like,
it's a straight girl that falls in love with a man, and they're eventually gonna kiss and get married, and we know what happens after that. Like,
yep,
you're selling sex more in those books if we're gonna really go down that road.
it
But all
is
to say, I think it's
ridiculous.
interesting, and the next day, her husband, and only her husband, did the
Mm.
conversation with the LGBTQ plus community. So, I also, again, just points to why a lot of that stuff, I think, falls flat for them.
You just made me think of something. I wonder if
Mhm.
part of the long-term, kind of idea or roadmap for Kate and Will is to present Will as a little more forward thinking, progressive,
Yes.
a modern king. But don't worry, because his wife Kate is traditional and she is going to keep those
Mhm.
important traditional values. Do you know what I mean? I think that's part
Yeah.
of this separate sphere that's happening.
And that's why I also think why they got the DeSantos comparison, with that family, because DeSantos, he's out there, he's more
Oh,
aggressive with this
DeSantis.
talk.
Sorry.
DeSantis, yeah,
No, you're
that
talking
piece of
okay,
shit.
just for our not for our
Or
non-American
yes,
listeners, Ron DeSantis is the governor of Florida. He's a piece of shit, and he's running for president and doing terribly, which is wonderful to see.
yay! And recently there was an article, maybe a couple months ago. I'm not forgetting where. I will post about it, but in the article talking about his wife, there's a comparison to Kate and her wardrobe. They're just purely
Mm,
talking about the
yep.
wardrobes and how they, have this give across this message that I'm the traditional, glamorous, beautiful wife who loves my family and supports my husband. And then the husband is more aggressive with his words and with his platform and his beliefs. And I feel like obviously William and him are different
Yes.
in what these are, but I feel like it's that same
I
mechanism
understand
they're
the analogy you're
using.
going with. I do.
Yeah,
I
like
feel like
he's a
Ron
powerful
DeSantis
man.
I feel like Ron DeSantis maybe perhaps just ran for president because his wife was like, "I'd really like a chance to cosplay Jackie O. Can you make this happen for me?" And he's like,
It's so weird.
"Sure." As as
Right?
long as I can push my anti-gay,
Anti
teaching real
everything.
history, my whole agenda, as
No
long as I can
gay.
hate immigrants, that would be great. Thank you, Casey.
Right?
So,
And pro
okay,
white supremacy.
are you ready for my article? My bananas article? Okay,
Yes.
we're getting a little serious and well, no, it's bananas. I'm gonna tell you what's bananas. The financial situation of the crown. Okay?
Yeah.
These these people. Okay. So the big thing that has come out recently, this is from The Guardian, is this windfall that has come to Charles. And this is like the broad strokes of the article. And then we're going to get into some things because I read a book that just reads the royal family for filth when it comes to their finances. And I think you're really going to like these lines. So, the broad stroke is there's going to be a multi billion pound windfall from Britain's offshore wind farms owned by the crown and leased to developers. And that's going to piss people off because this is like a cost of living crisis and people can't heat their
Yeah.
homes. But anyway, so the Treasury said that they would half the proportion of the estate's profits paid to the royal household through the sovereign grant, which will fall from 25% in recent years to 12% from next year. But despite this actual payment to the monarch, it will remain like flat at the 20 in 2024, 2025. And I just again, I am not an economist and I know this shit is confusing and it's meant to be confusing. Like just
Yes.
because just because I can read does not mean all of this makes complete sense, but I'm going to like just break it down a little bit, okay? But before I do, before we go back to school, I just want to read this quote from Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, who helped to make this decision. He says, quote, "For almost 300 years, kings and queens have surrendered the profits from the crown estate to the British people, and in return, the government has provided a fraction of that to properly support the king in undertaking his official duties." End quote.
My
It's giving
face right now.
benevolent king. Yeah.
My face right now.
Oh, yeah.
They're
No,
so nice to give you their profits. Shut up.
exact wait till we
Like,
get into
shut
it because
the
you're gonna be
fuck
so
up.
happy about this. So a couple of months ago, I decided to figure out how they get paid. And I found some interesting little pitfalls, if little golden parachutes, if you will. Okay. It's giving Wall Street, it's giving financial collapse, psych, I'm
Yeah.
fine. So just a little history lesson, and I promise it'll be fun. The British royal family was supported pre 2011, and it goes back to 1760 when King George surrendered control over the Crown Estates. The Crown Estate is a collection of land and holdings. You also have the duchies, and that revenue goes to the treasury. In doing so, he passes off, defense funds, national debt, his own personal debts, to the treasury. In return, he received an
Hmm.
annual grant known as the Civil List. So the Civil List used to include the cost of the civil government until 1830. Then it became just the royal household expenses, paid for by public funds by the government who control the crown estate revenue. It's very convoluted. So then
Yes.
there's obvious transparency issues here because the government can't audit the civil list. So they can't know like where the money is going to go to. MPs cannot ask questions on spending on the civil list. So you just kind of have to accept whatever they come up
Which
with.
is just horrendous to not be able to even have a
Zero. Yeah.
parliament debate or question.
Mhm.
And as far as I know, too, especially after David Cameron, in parliament, they're not really allowed to discuss the royals at all, like anything going on with them now.
And when there are laws that come up that affect the royals the sovereign gets to weigh in
Yep.
on
He
those
gets to
laws
talk
and
to the
how she would like them to
PM.
go, or he. So this idea that
Mm.
Queen Elizabeth was this non-political leader is so not true. Anyway,
So wrong.
so the
Yes.
civil list had several parts. And in 2011, under David Cameron, it seems like a lot of evil starts under David Cameron. I'm just going to put it out there. It's consolidated into one sovereign grant. So it's paid for now by a percentage of the Crown Estate annual net income by the government. But there is this golden ratchet clause. It's ratchet, all right, that ensures funding could increase in line with the CE profits, guaranteed never to fall. So even if the profits from the Crown Estate dip, the Treasury is legally required to top that off. And that clause has kicked in twice. So
Wow.
they can never make less money. And now I want to go to the book Running the Family Firm by Laura Clancy. It is so masterful. And she reads these people for filth. So she argues that the concept of personal wealth is questionable, considering the monarchy's history of extraction and exploitation. Which, yes, because
Yes.
there's this whole idea, well, it's their money. And you're like, well, is it? Because it kind of
No.
feel like it's not. And then Andrew Duncan comes in and says, I got a thought. He argues that much of its portfolio was stolen from the church at the time of the Reformation or conquered by historical monarchs. So it's like, yeah, technically it's your land because your ancestors like 500 years ago stole that shit. Like, thanks
Exactly.
for
I mean,
giving us what should be ours.
this is like what we've talked about before with oh gosh, I'm forgetting the names in particular, but more than a few of the diamonds that they have stolen from like Africa and India.
Yep.
People are like, well, but they did own that land, or the person who sold it to them owned that land. No, that white man was a colonizer. And two generations before him, they stole the land from the people that were originally there, and then they took their riches and then forced those people to be slaves on those lands, and then they sell it after. It's like when you're literally looting and stealing, it's like, how can you truly say these things are yours? And you're passing these things on that
Exactly.
you stole. And that is like the root of their finances. I can't remember who it was, but they pretty much had admitted before that, like, Yeah, the royals shouldn't have control of the duchy. That shouldn't technically be their money. Let's think about it, because all of that money, people forget with the duchy, because I hear that a lot with the duchy. They're like, that's not tax money. I'm like, it is though. It's not as clear as the other money, but people forget if the monarchy didn't exist, all of that duchy money would go to the government, which means they would be able to use it, hopefully, for the people. That's
Yeah, and
billions of
that's what's hard.
dollars.
It's like, well, is it gonna be
Billions.
used in a good way? But I think this is also like this larger struggle of if we no longer really believe that the monarch is like has the divine right to rule the land because technically
Exactly.
they don't,
That's
then you
why.
have to find ways to justify the monarchy and painting it
Mhm.
as they are these benevolent leaders that give more than they take and they only cost this much a year. That helps to justify their worth and their continuation, like their survival basically. And
Yeah.
no one
It
talks about the finances too, and that's also very telling. As we'll get into with Dan Wootton, there are certain
yeah.
things, there's a front stage and a backstage, especially to the monarchy, and there are some things that the British media, for the most part, will not touch because it impacts their very livelihood.
Exactly. And I think too, part of the reason why is like being able to sell the royal family now that everyone doesn't believe that God chose them to rule, you know, is this whole patriotism. You tie the royal
Yes.
family to British
Yes.
pride. They are patriot. If you take down the British royal family, then like how what's Britain then? You know, like how what do we show for our pride? The flag is useless. We don't have the family. And that is so key to that. And I think again why they often are targeting like the Telegraph audience, the Daily Mail, and so on, because those are a lot of people too who tie British nationalism to white people.
Yes.
So there you go. It's perfect, you know,
What a cool system.
to
What a
them,
cool system. Yeah,
right? So
I
fun.
need to do more research into their finances because I find it very interesting and very telling that we don't talk about it, but let's move on to the
Yes.
main event. Okay, we know what y'all are here for. You are here for the Dan
Mm.
Wootton of it all. I don't know if it's Wooten or Wooten. I think we can call him whatever we
I
want, to
tried.
be honest.
Yeah, I looked it
Um,
up and it was like a little more of a Wooten, I think, like a. But
it's
yeah,
not like
again,
a
who gets
like a
who
a
cares?
Wooton. It's like I forget. Someone told me what it rhymed with, and now I'm confused. It's not like wood, but it. You know what? It really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
I
He doesn't.
listened to, like, the name in a British male voice, and he said the O's so softly, and I could not do it. That's all I remember
Oh, yeah,
trying to
that's
get the
what's
name. The
hard. If
O's
you
were
get,
said
like, a
so
mumbly
softly.
mouth yeah,
I
mumbly
can't do
mouth, you're not
it.
gonna get it.
My California
Yeah,
accent
what
and American
you
Yankee
know what?
slang
You know
can't
what?
do that.
We figured out Camilla. You know what I mean?
Thank
Like,
you.
you know what? One thing at a
Which
time,
again is
okay?
soft. Yeah, it's so
It
funny. It's just soft. I think it's their accents. I
it
can't do that.
I
I'm a
know, I
Yank.
know. I know, I'm from New Jersey, so the fact that I don't sound more obnoxious is shocking, and some people may not agree with that. So, yeah,
No,
I could have a
we're
much worse accent.
losers.
So anyway,
Exactly.
Newsby News and section and main topic are all Dan Wootton this week, and just to start off, this entire section is one big trigger warning. I mean, we are going to be
Yes.
talking about some really serious topics, so if sexual assault, anything like that is a trigger, you might wanna consider
Suicide. There will be
suicide, you might
mentions of
wanna
suicide,
consider
yes.
skipping this part, but I will say that we are going to proceed with caution and try to
Yes.
minimize how much we get into those graphic details because there's
Yes.
of course articles and tweet threads that you can read if you really want to get into it, which of course will be on our show notes, which live for free over on our Patreon. So first, I just want to run through the timeline a little bit of where we're at with all of this. So the week of July 13th, 2023, two Twitter accounts, one belonging to Dan's former partner, Alex, and the other a man who leveled some pretty serious allegations against Dan, including rape, and his name is Kevin. Dan Wootton, if you're not familiar, is a GB News presenter and columnist. He used to work for The Sun, and before that, News of the World. Dan is a gay man, which is important to the story. It was largely ignored at the time by most of the British media, except
Mhm.
notably The Guardian and Byline Times. Jim Watterson of on Twitter, who writes for The Guardian, mentioned he has been looking into Martin Branning for literal years. Martin Branning is Dan Wootton's alleged fake online presence that he's used to trick and extort men. So I mean, and the man, Jim Watterson literally says, "Here are my digits. Here's my WhatsApp. Slide into my DMs, please. Slide right in
Yeah.
any information you have." I
Yes.
am open and ready. I mean, listen, giving out your number, I'm impressed. So, Byline also drops their 3-part series, which we just found out before recording is actually going to be a 4-part series. And I was like, God damn it, Byline. Like, we had this perfectly lined up, and you just like, you killed it. I can't believe they didn't think of our recording schedule, but we'll work on it.
We're so
So,
important, guys.
and the big thing to note about the Byline Times investigation is that it is 3 years in the making. So this isn't like a knee-jerk reaction over a few accounts on Twitter. This
Exactly.
has been building. Now, perhaps Byline was going to wait to drop this and then saw that there was some rumor picking up on Twitter and allegations and decided now is the time
Yeah.
to strike.
Yeah,
Um,
and we'll talk about that
yeah.
too because
So
they
it
do
might
kind
be
of
that,
mention
but
it.
this has been a long time coming. It doesn't seem like a lot of real journalists are upset to see this happening to Dan. It seems like a bit of a
Yeah.
comeuppance, but also a comeuppance with fact. You know what I mean? With
Exactly.
actual facts and receipts to back it up. And perhaps there is something bigger at play than Dan. So do we want to
Yes.
start? Do you want to start with the Byline
Yeah,
investigation? Like, where do you want to
so
start?
I was gonna go over like kind of a brief just I wanted to go over a timeline, a little more in depth of the timeline of how this is all coming about because
Oh
I
yes,
think it's
please.
important. You know, people are like, well, is this just people don't like Dan because, well, he's an asshole? There's a difference between an asshole and being like, a predator, a
Yes.
sexual predator. But I need people to remember why this may have to us seem like, wow, where did this come out of nowhere? It did not. Because the week this came up, which the first tweet that started this was from a Twitter account called I'm Shane Reaction on July 12th. This was after things like the Hugh Edwards, I think I'm saying his first name
No,
wrong, from
you
the
are. It's
BBC.
Hugh, but it's spelled Huw, so you feel like you're being tricked that it's something else, but it's not.
Okay, guys, so we're going to get into allegations. And now this all kicked off on the 12th. And I want to remind people this did not come out of nowhere. This is following, first off, the Philip Schofield stuff that happened like the month prior. And then we had the stuff, Hugh Edwards, that was happening that week. Hugh Edwards, I'm actually going to read this from the Hollywood Reporter. That is just an article briefly going over the accusations. And in it says the news about Edwards follows a weekend of speculation and finger pointing sparked by a story in the UK tabloid The Sun on Friday in which the girl's mother came forward with accusations claiming that the request for photos had begun when her child, now 20, was 17. So they're saying Edwards was pretty much buying explicit photos of this girl. Now, in other media outlets that we are looking at, especially in the United Kingdom, they often refer to this person as like a teen or something like that. Like they don't give a gender. We've only seen this so far from the Hollywood Reporter. So we want to make that clear,
Yeah, and also
just in case maybe
to
they're
your
wrong.
point to your point, the son originally does not unmask Edwards. It's actually his wife that eventually
Yes.
says Edwards is the BBC presenter that's accused. He is currently seeking mental health treatment, which isn't one of those like Raquel after Vanderpump Rules goes to like
Yes.
a spa. She's like and getting help. This is
Yes.
like he has battled significant depression and has had like like in bed
Hmm.
cannot get out. I mean, serious depression he is battling. So
Yes,
just to
because,
give
like,
that.
it should be explained, unlike, say, Philip Schofield, who I hope burns. The Hugh Edwards thing and with the son, the issue is that and why the son got called out, because it seems like, well, they told half truths and that they may have inadvertently paid the parents to say that they were that this girl was sending the photos when she was still 17, when in actuality, the girl, and again, this girl could be lying because she's afraid. There's so much going on here. But she is saying through her lawyer, we do not know who she is or who they are, that she was adult when this happened. Okay, whether she's an adult and she chose to sell explicit photos and he chose to buy them, which is not a crime. Him and his wife can deal with that. That is not a crime. So again, this all happens. And a lot of people were upset with the son for obvious reasons because they trailed it along for a whole weekend of who is it? Who is it? Who is it? And now we find out that the story is not airtight like they claimed, and they made very serious accusations. So July 12th, we get a tweet from I'm Shane Reaction. It says, now the Sun have promised to stop printing any more of the Hugh Edwards non-story. Maybe they can now address the allegations that they protected their own sex pest in the not too distant past. Now, this is a section from the Private Eye. I cannot find this article anywhere. I tried, I promise. And it has like over 2 million views by now. It says, the article says, by the private eye, the pontificating of one particular
Oh,
pundit, however, has
pontificating. Sorry.
Oh, thank you. The pontificating of one particular pundit, however, has left former colleagues godsmacked, given his own given his past propensity for sexually harassing younger male members of staff who worked for him, both inside and outside the office. Members of the HR department at his former employer openly admitted protecting him during investigations into his behavior, at least one of which resulted in an employee being moved to another apartment to avoid his boss's attentions. While a number of bullying complaints against the same man resulted in staff leaving with payouts. Asked by the Eye if these also involved non disclosure agreements in 2018, a spokesman for the company said, I'm afraid we're going to have to decline. We're going to have to decline to comment.
If that
So,
doesn't all play out in part 2 that we've seen from
yeah,
Byline Times, I
I was
mean,
about to say, you guys,
wow.
we're gonna have a lot. Wait, because these tweets literally are all backed up by Byline Times that comes out like a few days later, and then articles that come out a week later. So, in response on July 13th from Shane Reaction to a tweet, he also says, the Sun have spent this year chastising other sexual harassers like they're holier than thou, all while they protected one of their own, paying off staff members targeted by a sex pest and promoting him while they did it. And I will add here, Dan Wootton was all over the Philip Schofield stuff. And mind
Yep.
you, again, Philip can burn. But he really was like, there shouldn't be non disclosure agreements. This is horrible. People need to be protected, blah, blah, blah. All while, allegedly, he's doing the same exact thing. So it is very demonic, okay? So now this led to Alex, Dan Wootton's ex from 2009 to 2013, responding to that tweet, the original tweet with the private eye article in it. And he reveals that it's about Dan pretty much. He says, he also reveals, and this is a series of tweets, you guys, and some of it I am going to get a little bit into where you might hear more of the nitty gritty, okay? Just letting you guys know now. He claims that while dating Dan, he had no privacy and that he stole all of his passwords to his social medias and emails. Again, you're going to see this is something that is where Dan is repeatedly accused of, like
Remember
repeatedly.
this.
Yes. So Alex, the first time he catches him, so I'm going to start with this tweet here. When I found that my Gmail account was being regularly accessed from the News of the World office where he worked at the time, I was an idiot though and allowed myself to be emotionally bullied into not leaving him, but then I found out more. So Alex talks about finding an external hard drive belonging to Dan, and I'm going to read his tweets about that. I found an external, and this is Alex tweets, I found an external hard drive. On it, I found a video of one of Dan's supposed friends, a Sun employee, having sex with his boyfriend. The video was clearly made in secret and filmed from afar by a hidden camera. In the same folder as the video, I found a transcript of an MSN conversation between the colleague's partner and someone called Martin Branning, whereby an arrangement was indeed made to make the sex tape in secret with his colleague's knowledge in exchange for £500. I knew instantly that Martin Branning, I said that wrong. They wanted to make the sex tape in secret without his
Yep.
colleague's
Yep.
knowledge in exchange for £500. I knew instantly that Martin Branning was Dan. Again, we will see this later in the Bylines articles. So I say here, directly pertains to the Byline investigation about the title, about this Martin Branning character, which is what was dropped yesterday in their third segment. And that was called His First Victim. But we'll get to that later. So he goes on to explain the second time he hears the name Martin Branning is when he runs into his ex a month later or so after he left Dan. So the first thing he asked me, talking about his ex, without me saying a word about it, was, what's the deal with this Martin Branning guy? Literally chilled me to the bone because it was the first time I've heard anyone say his name out loud. And it was equally disturbing as the first time he had heard it, he says. So Martin, was trying to pay the man to make sex videos with random men, including one of Alex's longtime ex-boyfriends. And I'm sorry?
Oh, I didn't know. Wait, Alex's longtime. Oh.
Yes.
Alex's
So
longtime ex-boyfriend?
exactly. Alex is one of Alex's longtime ex-boyfriends. Dan was
Oh,
trying to get
that
this
is
random man,
diabolical.
right? This random man he's seeing in the bar. And he's saying, like, this is someone like he briefly dated before Dan, this guy he is talking to in the bar that he ran into. So, and he is saying, yes, this Brandon guy kept bugging me to make sex tapes with random guys, but he also wanted me talking to Alex, your longtime ex boyfriend. And he's saying this Martin Brandon guy also wanted me to make a sex tape with Dan Wootton too. Remember, none of these people at the time know that Dan are the same people. So it's kind of like, and this is explained later, Martin Branding was like this middleman. That's how he was always approaching these
He's a
guys. Like, I'm a
show
middleman.
business agent, quote unquote.
Exactly. Yes, and I've got this client who wants this, so he'll pay you to do this. This is his type. Let me give you the money. And then when he starts getting to someone close towards him, he acts like, "Oh yeah, well I guess, the man that I'm helping out, he must know this guy and he wants you to sleep with him." So that's how Dan, aka Branning, is acting, and none of these men know that they're equated. So he also referenced the period in 2020 when Caroline Flack died by suicide. He says after a few drinks, he went to Twitter to expose Dan because he was sick of seeing him all over media, social media, and his show, pretending like he cared about Caroline Flack, doing his whole crying, we need to be kind bullshit. So he goes onto Twitter and he pretty much says he makes a lot of the accusations he does in this thread. He quickly takes it down because of the pressure from Dan directly saying, you need to take this down now. This is not acceptable. And his threats and so on and so on. But he said,
And
he's
it's
like, I
also
wanted to do it just,
I'm
okay,
sorry, what I was also with
please.
Caroline Flack, it's important to remember at that time, he is with The Sun, he's an editor, and
Hmm.
so I think they've managed, because 'cause I've done some digging, to both potentially remove stories that Dan wrote prior about her, but even if he
Yes.
didn't write, some of the stories that were printed that presumably he gave an okay on were vicious and terrible, and if that's how you treat a
Terrible.
quote unquote friend, I don't wanna know how you treat an enemy. I just wanna give that little bit of context
Yeah.
there, that
And a
Dan was the
little
editor of
extra
The Sun that
context there.
yeah, that wrote these terrible published terrible stories about this woman.
Terrible. In context to that too is Caroline Flack's most recent ex-boyfriend before she passed away. He went off on Dan when he was trying to have all these tears. He pretty much said, "You were a liar. You stalked her. You abused her. You wrote horrible articles about her. You thought you were better than her." And it came, and he made threats against him, like, "I'm going to get you," and stuff. And Dan actually had to take him to court for harassment. But during that time, Caroline Flack's ex boyfriend also put on his IG at the time that Dan was a sexual predator and his time was coming. So I'm just saying that. And of course, it
It's
was
out
brushed
there.
off at the time because he was,
Yes.
going to court for literally stalking him. So,
Unfortunately, yeah, the move there, it's hard because you do have to weigh in the fact that this man was found guilty of, her
yes.
threatening Dan, and that unfortunately kind of muddies the waters. But Alex, do you have any more timeline stuff? Because then I was thinking I could do just talk a little bit about Byline Times that I think is important before we get into like what's actually in the article.
Yeah, I just have one more I wanna talk about because this will also be in the
Okay.
article. So, he puts this up after Caroline dies only for a little bit before he takes it down from pressure, but he did say people still reached out. So he says they've been seen, and shortly after I received the following message from a former colleague of his who told me he and a number of other colleagues from the Sun had been harassed by Martin Branning. I cropped the image to protect the person. And in this, what we can see from this DM, it says, Alex, without prejudice and please strictly between us for now, I remember you sent me some pretty colorful messages back in the day, water under the bridge and all that. You mentioned emails from Max, the person says Max Branning. I received messages asking me to do private work for 10K tax free, just pose nude, etc. It has been causing a great deal of stress and upset for a number of people I know too. Felt like blackmail or entrapment. I showed my wife. She agrees it should go further. I have taken advice from police and lawyers. It was faceless until now. Would you be prepared to discuss? Obviously, understand if not. I just can't let this go on if there are others suffering in silence. I'm in shock. And then it cuts off. And I will say,
Mm.
Alex did speak to the police in 2020, and he said he has never heard back, and nothing has happened since.
Yeah. That is another thing to talk about, with the Levinson
Yes.
inquiries and part 2 never happening, which would have looked into journalists' involvement with the police, which was never investigated. So, yeah.
So we had a second victim come forward on July 14th, and that his name is Kevin Sutherland, and not to be confused with the actor, the American actor. Okay.
Is his name
So
Kevin? Is his name Keith Sutherland? Oh my god, people are
I
gonna
well, I
read
looked on
us
his
for
IG and
freaking
stuff.
filth. Oh, Kevin Sutherland.
Yeah,
Oh
it's
no, I'm
Kevin.
thinking I'm mixing up another actor. Please ignore me for the end of time. Continue.
Okay. So he talks about how he met him at the Glasgow MTV Movie Awards. And I think what's really interesting about Kevin, again, it's kind of sets up the targets that Dan goes after. He was young, he was an escort, and he was desperate for money, which is why he was an escort. On top of that, he had a past where he was actually jailed for what was it? Extortion in 2010. So again, someone with a past, someone who's desperate for money. We see this. So he says he met him at the bar. He saw him again when he was going up to his hotel. And all of a sudden, Dan comes to his door and he gets in by pretty much using, he says in the beginning of his tweet, knowledge about him. And he said, I couldn't believe how much he knew about me in the short time I had seen him. Again, Dan suddenly knows all of this information. And I'm going to read directly. He says, Dan knew a lot about me on this chance encounter. We had never met before that night, although he had very briefly seen me in the lift going up to my room hours before. He had done his homework on all well-established escorts at this time, which was very clear to me in the conversation that took place. This was not a booking and there was no exchange of money. I made it clear to Dan that I was on a personal night out and I was not here to do that. He knew things about my past. Some of the information was in the public domain, some of the details were not. And some of what was said by him was so specific and so related to one thing that it showed me that this man had researched me deeply. So the knowledge he's referring to that he got in and the stuff that he could find the public domain, but couldn't, was the 2000 conviction of his extortion. So and I feel really, this makes me just sad though, because of how much Kevin has to talk about his past, because he recognizes that he's not the perfect victim. And us as a society love a perfect victim. So he knows these are also things that Dan could use against him. And just because we know it takes so much for these alleged victims to talk about this, I did want to read like the last section of his Twitter post before he signed off. He has a way with words and, just supporting these victims. So this is from him. He says, finally, I am telling it exactly like it is. This is a firsthand account and it is my words. And I just refuse to make this abuser's secrets my secrets. I'm sick and tired of disgusting individuals getting away with doing the most evil acts and they are celebrated. This man is a rapist and my memory is his crime scene. I was there. It happened to me, and I know the full impact this has had. I pray that everyone who has been hurt by this vicious, vile man eventually finds some kind of healing. Writing this was beyond painful. Kevin Sutherland.
Wow.
So,
Yeah,
sending love to his
and to
victims.
your point,
Sending love.
while it's like, yeah, there's some things in his past where you're like, "Ugh, does not make for the best," like you said, perfect victim, but also
Mhm,
there is no
exactly.
benefit really to him coming forward. Like it makes him look bad because he's admitting a lot of
No.
information that's personal and could be used
Yes,
against him. He does not know if anything is going to actually come of this situation for
exactly.
Dan. So there's really no benefit for him coming forward. And that's, I
No,
think, always important to remember. Like
exactly.
there
And
this is going to impact him more negatively more
big
so
time.
than
Yes,
anything else.
especially knowing, Dan, if it's all true, it is, I'm sure, in his emails and so on and so on. And I will say Kevin did report this in 2021, and similar to Alex, he has never heard from the police about it.
Yeah. Yep,
Yeah,
that, little stonewalling over there. So, before we get into the
exactly.
Byline Times articles, I wanna walk people through Byline Times because if you listen to Dan Wootton, and I'm assuming no one here is watching GB News, but just in case you saw his absolutely bananas non-apology victim statement from about a week ago, he calls Byline Times this left-wing blog, this dark force that's trying to take him down. It's very much like a Trumpian playbook. I do wanna give some
Yes,
information on Byline Times because they do have a very interesting backstory. And I think it's important to understand in order to get why these articles are so important because there is this amazing article from Prospect Magazine. It was put out in June 2023 and it focuses on Prince Harry's court cases against the British media. But it also shadows Graham Johnson, who was one of the founders of Byline Times. And it opens with this party in November of 2022 where there's this meetup at this members bar in London. It's hosted by Hugh Grant. It's one part party, but it's also one part an event to bring together the most unlikely people in their continuing movement to curtail the excesses of the British tabloid press. The assortment of people is interesting because, along with the victims of illegal tactics by the tabloid press, are some of the same people that used to engage in this behavior and actually targeted these individuals. They are all
Very
commingling.
interesting.
For example, Glenn Mulcair is there. He's a reformed private eye who spent time in jail for hacking phones. Dan Evans is there, who is a co-author
Woo.
of the Wooten investigation for Byline Times. He also served time and got the book thrown at him for his involvement in this. But they're all there together because they all have this mission to right wrongs and prevent these things from happening again. So the other person that's there is Graham Johnson. He is, again, one of the co-founders of Byline Times, and he is described as a tabloid apostate, someone who regrets aspects of his former career and seems hell-bent on making amends by bringing to light as much evidence of historical wrongdoing as he possibly can. So again, he's the co-founder. He's published dozens of investigations into historic malpractice. And in many ways, Dan Evans, who's one of the authors on this byline piece on Dan, as well as Graham Johnson, have had similar newspaper careers and kind of had this come to Jesus moment. Um, and are trying to use like their skills for good, and that really overlaps with Prince Harry, who is also trying to expose on his behalf his wife, his children, his mother, the nefarious tactics of the British press. And Jan Evans, like Riley puts it, that, justice has been done with the phone hacking cases. When Andy Coulson went to jail, who was the deputy editor and then editor of News of the World, also worked with Rebecca Brooks, also had an affair with Rebecca Brooks. That's a story for another time. And
Mm.
it's this idea, again, that things haven't really changed that much, despite what tabloids may say, and that there is way more to expose. And I do have a larger theory on what bringing Dan Wootton down would do, but here's what I think. I think this is definitely going to be a two-parter, Alex. What do you think?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we literally are
So
looking at how many pages we have left.
I'm like, "Oh my god, there's like 26 pages." So, what we're gonna do is we are gonna have a part 2. So, we're ending here. We're going to get back into Byline's investigation into Dan, some of our theories, our main takeaways, our lingering thoughts, and much, much more. So, stick around. That will
Yes.
drop very soon. Pinkies up.
Pinkies up,
Bye.
guys. See you on the other side.
Bye, Scabbers.